we last talked, you were in Walton, you had been ordained, and you had met Lenica. So how long did you court her before she agreed to marry you?
We were married the next summer, so that was 1 year. And we were married in August of 1996.
And then you continued to be in Walton 4 or 5 years?
Yep, about 5 years. At about, I'd say 4 years into our ministry in Walton, the Foreign Mission Board contacted me and asked if I would consider a call to Japan.
Oh. Was that something that, I mean, had you expressed an interest in Japan, or how did that come about?
No, I think it goes all the way back to seminary time and toward the end of seminary that I had an interest in evangelism and you know, doing that kind of work, and that was part of the reason I believe that I was considered for Cyprus. So then the Japan call came.
Yeah.
And we considered that for not too long of a time.
Have you any ability in languages?
No, actually, that was the main thing. That was always a struggle, and we knew that it would be a great adjustment. But what that did cause us to think about was the idea of doing more of a church planting ministry. Now, when we were living in Walton, every summer we used to travel up to Canada for our holidays with Alenica's parents. And when we would drive up through Canada to our parents' house, we would pass through Kitchener-Waterloo, where we are. And there were not any Reformed churches in the area, and you could see that it was rapidly developing. You know, there are, 500,000 people in the area, and new neighborhoods were going up all the time.
Yeah.
Every year when we would go by, there'd be a whole new development here. And
What was driving that? Technology?
Yeah, so the golden triangle that they talk
Okay.
about, right? So a lot of technology in
Yep.
the area. So we'd always thought, you know, this seems like a great place for a work to begin. So we asked the St. Lawrence Presbytery to consider the possibility of a church plant in Kitchener. And we put together a proposal to see about exploring that work. And we drove up in winter of 2000 and scoped out the area and then put a proposal together for the St. Lawrence Presbytery. And so they then called us to do church planting here.
What was that like in the beginning? I mean, you were just coming, there was nothing here, is that right?
That's right. There's nothing here.
So how did you set about that task?
I mean, looking back on it, I would not recommend it again.
Okay.
I think the biblical pattern is that you should be going 2 by 2 in that kind of situation. And so it was very difficult. I can remember we came, and as you say, there was nothing there. We began attending an OPC church outside of Cambridge, which is about, it was like 45 minutes from our house, so that we would have that regular contact. And then it was just a matter of, where do you begin? How do you begin? And I can remember in the morning going on a morning walk and praying and realizing how there's nothing that you can do in your own strength. And it caused me to think about my time in Walton and realize how much I took for granted. That every Lord's Day there's going to be a congregation that shows up there and I'm going to be able to preach. Yeah. And not really thinking about the only reason why there's a congregation there at all is that the Lord is upholding it.
Correct.
And the Spirit of God is still bringing people to it.
Yeah.
You should never take for granted that people actually come to the church. So
that's an excellent point.
Yeah.
That's a tremendous point.
I was struggling with that, where do you begin? And I met with a number of ministers from the URC churches who were doing church planting. And we would get together. There was one guy from the ARP, one guy from the URC. The URC church planter in Toronto was working with the Sikh population. And then the ARP was doing a prison ministry. And we would get together, once a month at a restaurant and talk. And the URC minister gave me a great deal of helpful advice. He'd say, just be constant someplace, like a presence.
Yes.
Like in a Tim Hortons restaurant. Yeah. Be sure that you just sit down there, be there at the same time every day, put your Bible and your books out on the table, and just be there. And that's what I started to do. And at one time, there was a young lady who was in the mall and came over and said, "That's a good book." And I said, "Yes, it is." We started talking, and she turned out to be part of a Mennonite group of young people who would get together every week for a Bible study, but they didn't know what the Bible taught.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Well, I wouldn't mind leading that study if you'd like that." And so we did that for a while, and then we would have them over to our house for a Bible study. And then I also asked Chapter's Bookstore, if you're familiar with Chapter's Bookstore, if I could do a lecture series on philosophy in the bookstore there. And I said, I'll come in once a month and set up some chairs, and we'll just let whoever customers want to come down, they can sit. And so they said, yeah, that would be fine.
They were open to that.
They did. This was when Chapters initially, their business model was just come in, basically books. They had a coffee shop there and everything. That lasted, I think, for just a couple of years because it was destroying their business right now. People weren't buying books.
Socializing.
Yeah. So we set up the chairs, and they would announce it over the speaker. A lecture on philosophy is offered in the corner, and it was there, and it basically was like an apologetics opportunity for people there. And one of the people that started attending was the husband and wife of. The wife was a friend of Alinika's in university, and he was very interested, and so they started attending. And when we began holding worship services in 2003, after a number of weeks, they were one of the first couples to attend. We also had Alinika's brother and his new wife had always been interested in church planting and in this particular church plant. And so they moved to the area to be part of the work, and they've been a backbone of the work since that time.
You need that. As you said,
that's right.
As you began by saying, you need a sort of 2x2, and if you don't have the 2x2, you certainly need 3 or 4 core families to.
That's right. And they were immensely and still continue to be just a real backbone to the congregation. So I did the thing at Chapters for a year, doing this every month, coming in for a lecture series. The meeting that we had, the penultimate meeting that we had, was an amazing one. There was an interaction with a couple of people that was going really, really well in terms of just coming to Christ, speaking about their questions were like, what is the reason for the cross? And so here's in the bookstore. And after that lecture, this one gentleman that I'd been interacting with, he said, "Do you know what I do for a living?" And he said, "I'm the guy in such and such museum," I don't know which museum it was, "who sets up the dinosaur displays."
Right.
And he said, "And if what you're telling me is true, all of that is not true." And I said, "That's right." And I handed him my card. I said, "Let's get together and let's talk." So then the next month, before the lecture began, and I went in and they were setting up the chairs. And by this time, Chapters bookstores were giving me gift cards for doing this.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Right.
It was like a $25 gift every time I did it.
Because you're attracting people coming in.
Yeah, and they would set up the chairs for me, and it was kind of like You know, it was really amazing. So I would walk into chapters, and the first thing I went over to the Starbucks, and I got a hot chocolate, and I turn around and I see on the other side of the room when they're setting up the chairs, and I see the guy that I talked with the month before.
Yeah.
And my heart leapt for joy. But he's come back.
Yeah.
And there are other people there that are starting, and I'm thinking this is really going to take
Yeah.
up. So I'm starting to walk there, and I'm feeling really. And as I'm approaching, I'm hearing him talking, and he's saying, "This guy is a liar. He's nothing but he's just a Christian minister trying to trick you into coming to his church." And my heart was sinking.
Yeah.
And employees from chapters are standing there.
Yeah.
And then they ended
That was it?
the relationship. They ended that. So I didn't know what to do next.
A plant from the enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he saw what was going on. He saw the effect of that and the impact of that, and he just used it. It's astonishing what opposition will come. We tend to think it's very full on, but there's always an undercurrent, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, you know, what's the next step?
Well, we'll need to leave it there because we've done
Oh,
our
yeah,
time.
no, that's too bad.
That's good. I know, but we'll come back to it. We'll come back. You'll have another crack at it.